Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Ride the Stream. I am Michelle Brittany. I'm an independent scholar. I write on things about horror, fantasy, I guess, sci-fi, mummies, pop culture, just all that kind of stuff. I've got a couple of books that I've edited, and I'm working on one on the Mummy franchise, specifically Stephen Sommers' 1999 blockbuster, The Mummy, that I think a lot of us hold near and dear. And I am joined by my ever wonderful co-host, Travis Licata, with a big smile on his face.
Oh, thank you. Hi.
Oh my goodness. And we are a pair. We talk about our programs that we like to stream. And we are talking about the series Lost that broadcast between 2004, I think, through 2010.
Hmm.
121 episodes that we are marching through at a very delicious rate of one a week, and really having a great time with it. I'm a newbie to
Totally.
the series. I have watched through episode 21 of the first issue of the first season. And then when we started talking about, hey, we should talk about this in front of a camera, I stopped and I restarted. But Travis, you are a veteran of Lost, having started with, I think, no, season 4 when it was broadcasting, and then you binged the first 3 seasons to catch up, right?
Yeah, that is exactly right. And then I stayed glued to the TV week to week from seasons 4 through 6. And I've rewatched it a few times over the years. But this is my first rewatch of it in, gosh, probably 5 or 6 years, I think. So getting to come back to it each week is so it's so fun. We were just talking offline. It's like I'm already excited for the next episode, but much like when things are broadcast on TV, having that anticipation build,
Mhm.
so that way, we get to chat about it, explore potential ideas and what might happen, because I don't remember everything that happened. Um,
Yeah.
so it's exciting to go through it in that way, much like it was with TV, where we explore it week to week. Um, and then I'll watch each episode before we chat, so that way it's not like binging on it. And I do think that is my preference on viewing things, especially, I mean, series. Like, I feel like there's a greater opportunity to form attachments to characters. You get a little more insight into like what makes characters tick. Um, so the fact that this is episode 10,
Mm-hmm.
we have over 110 more to go.
Yeah,
That's
we
that's a
do.
good day.
Yeah.
That's a good
I,
day. So
yep. Things to look forward to over the next couple of years, for sure.
yeah, and then I'm sure we'll like we'll mix in some other you know series or movies along the way. But Lost is a fantastic starting point to do what we're doing. Ride the train.
Yeah. And I guess to pull the curtain back and reveal a little bit of the behind the scenes, we're recording in December, but this episode won't appear until, well, let's see, 10, so probably in February. And I think
Mm.
by then we'll actually be finished up recording the first season. And we'll probably look at some other content so that way we can, bring 2 episodes a week to you, that you'll be able to watch. Just in case if you're not into Lost, I don't know how you couldn't be, but
Yeah.
if for some reason you really are not into Lost, we will be having other content arriving soon if it hasn't already appeared, because we are recording this so early. But with that, we are on episode 10 of the first season. It's titled Raised by Another. It was originally broadcast on December 1st of 2004. So my gosh, 20 years. And I'm going to be honest with you. Okay, I'm not a big social media person, but I haven't even had anything come through my little world about 20 years of Lost, which I thought was kind of interesting. I don't know. For you, Travis, have you really seen anything touted about a 20-year retrospective on Lost?
No, I hadn't even thought about it. I mean, we talked about it, I think last week too, about it being the episode being about 20 years old. And you would think, and again, I'm not dialed into social media. Sometimes I kind of, crawl back into my hermit hole. And um, so there could be other venues, um, sites that have touched on 20th anniversary. Um, and I'm there's probably I'm sure there's people who've wanted some sort of spin-off or prequel of Lost at some point. Which I'm fine if they don't. Like I think
Yeah.
it's okay. We can make new content and not worry about
Yeah, exactly.
marching off prior franchise.
Yeah, there's enough of that out there. I mean, that happens every so often, right? I mean, but
All the time. I'm not sour about that at all. No.
no, we're not sour here. No, no, not at all. Um, well, I think with that information, I think if you're ready, Travis, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the plot synopsis, and then we can kind of dig in deeper and really discuss some of the different things that happen, what we
Yeah.
feel about them, and what were some of our favorite scenes and um, characters and things like that. So, without further ado, I'll go ahead and start that synopsis. So, first off, all I can say is thank goodness for the golfing humor of the last episode because we are back knee deep into the tension filled terrain as this episode focused primarily on Claire and her impending delivery date that is perhaps a couple of weeks away. And as Travis, you and I were talking offline, that this is the first episode where they really did kind of focus in on one character, and then the narrative is really uh, revolving around and evolving from one character and kind of one situation. So the episode opens up with Claire waking up from a nightmare. She's having a series of nightmare where her child is either taken away from her or that someone is seeking to harm her baby. The dreams are so vivid that Claire wakes up from sleep screaming hysterically, and her hands are in fact bleeding from her clenching her fists so tight that her nails dig into her palms. Jack tends to Claire and gathers details about her OBGYN appointments and ascertains that Claire may be stressed. You think? And manifesting that stress through the nightmares and her sleepwalking that she's experiencing as well. Jack tries to prescribe sedatives to her, but she rebuffs his medical solution and accuses him of not believing her. She wants to leave the cave and return to the beach where she felt safer. Charlie has been keeping tabs on Claire because he does like her and wants to provide her support by making sure she's drinking, eating, generally comfortable, and getting rest. He knows that she doesn't have anybody else. She's all alone. She's, almost ready to deliver her baby, and he does want to be there for her. She kind of rejects his profession of liking her. And the rejection really is like water off a duck's back. Charlie continues to help her, and eventually Claire does come to understand and appreciate Charlie's friendship especially after she experiences a series of contractions and kind of a false labor while walking towards the beach with Charlie at her side. Because Claire had believed that she'd been attacked during the night, Hurley takes action and the lead on making a list of all survivors in his notebook, including their name, where they live, and reason for travel. For example, we see him talking with Locke, Ethan, Shannon, and Boone. In fact, Boone tells Hurley that if he had the plane's manifest, Hurley would be able to cross-check if the survivors are telling him the truth, something I didn't think about. And of course, who is the person with the manifest? Yep, Sawyer. Sawyer the pack rat. Cat
He's got
rat.
everything.
He's got everything. This leads to a straight from the hip conversation between Hurley and Sawyer. And guess what? There is someone on Hurley's list that did not show up on the manifest. The flashbacks revolve around Claire's backstory of finding out that she was pregnant and major events leading up to her getting a ticket for that specific flight from a psychic who warns Claire that she must raise her child, no one else. Lastly, in the closing moments of the episode, Saeed has returned and relays to Jack and Kate that he found the French woman, and he repeats her warning that the survivors are not alone on the island. And of course, at the very last moment, we have Claire and Charlie walking back towards the cave, and Ethan says, "Hi there." And that's the end of the episode. So, wow,
It's
yet
it
again.
is such a good episode. I'll be saying that a lot throughout the course of this series, but um, there there's so much to focus on, even though they primarily focus on Claire. There's so many little tidbits that happen, between relationships, um, understanding the absolute certainty that Claire is going to give birth soon, um, the the dangers associated with her being stressed, um, and the Ethan guy, like he went from I'm a helper. His first episode was last week, hunting with Locke,
Yeah,
and then he's gathering wood. He's I think gathering fruit at one point, and Charlie tells him, "Hey, Claire's having contractions. You need to go run and get Jack." He clearly did not do that. Um,
no, he returns without Jack.
and he goes from a friendly, like, hi there to where Charlie asks, "Where's Jack?" And his face just goes like deadpan, like, I, like that's what made me tell you offline. Like, this is the oh shit episode because that expression on his face, it's completely different from any other episode. Any other episode was the unknown, whether it's the sound of the monster, the polar bear, um,
The
hearing
wild
the whispers,
boars.
the wild boars.
Yep.
This is a known threat right there, right in front of you. That's a person because the expression on his face didn't tell me that he was there to help.
Yeah.
Um, and I've wanted to hear like your perspective on when you watched it for the first time and hearing how like Claire's scream, obviously that's very jarring. Like in overall with the episode, like what was your impression of focusing on Claire and then seeing how like whatever path that this episode was leading to kind of led to what is basically a cliffhanger.
Yeah, it really was. And that was probably the thing that I was left with is the fact that it was a few things. So one, the fact that it was a cliffhanger, because I saw Ethan and I'm like, how come how come Jack isn't with him? We never see uh, you know, that rule of progression, on film that he has met Jack. He obviously hasn't because Jack is with Saeed. Um, and, he is one of the people that Hurley interviews, along with Locke, Shannon, and Boone. But we don't see him interview other people. So, yeah, we get a little bit of information about Ian. And I'm kind of like thinking, oh, okay, well, he's, there's 46 people. We obviously haven't met 46 people in the episode, or in this series of 10 so far. So, I mean, I felt like it was reasonable that he is not a threat. But as I'm learning, that we usually get clues that we get in the prior episode are typically foreshadowing something to come in the next episode, or probably in episodes to follow thereafter. Um, so the fact that we get some conflict there, because first the voice on the radio is that, you know, there's others, and those that were with her are no more, but there must be somebody else there. Um, and then to find out that it's actually monsters, and then it's a person, at least one, who is this Ethan guy? Because, even though it's not revealed in the episode, you almost jump right into the next episode if you're streaming, and you find out that it's Ethan. That's not on the manifest. So I'm sorry for the big reveal on that, but I mean, um, yeah, it was things that I hadn't really picked up the first time, which was like, I didn't think about the fact that the psychic was actually driving Claire to be in a situation to keep her baby. I didn't figure that out. I mean, I was figuring that out when Charlie was saying, well, it could be this. And then Claire's repeating it, and I'm like, oh shit, it could be
Yeah.
that. It could be that the psychic knew exactly what was going on, because in the first reading, he definitely like, whoa, sorry, here's your money back. Go away. Um, to him becoming intimately involved monetarily and really just hassling her that she's got to keep the baby. And then to the little things of like the pen, not the first pen not working, the second pen not working when she tries to sign the contract, that it's a sign. So I honestly, as things were becoming revealed to me through the story, I was kind of making the same revelations right along with Claire, like with regards to her being on the island wasn't just chance. The
Yeah.
psychic knew. Oh, okay, we're gonna in the Lost World, the psychic.
Yeah.
Whether you believe in psychics or not, that doesn't really matter, because in the story, it's driven that the psychic knew. And honestly, I believe it. But I wasn't picking up on it when it was in the flashbacks. So I felt like the way that the writers are dropping the clues help you to kind of, again, um, be part of the survivors and kind of experiencing right along with them what they're experiencing, and being part of that story as it's unfolding. And that's one of the things that really attracts me to the show so far, is the fact that, yeah, maybe you could have, guessed that already. But the fact that the writing is good and there's a lot of other things going on, um, that you may not catch it until you catch it with the character that the story's revolving around, in this case, Claire.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, at the end when Ian shows up, or Ethan, sorry, when Ethan shows up back with Charlie and Claire, I feel taken aback because I'm like, where's Jack?
Yeah.
And I'm feeling their tension. It's causing me to feel tension and stress. Like, wait a minute, where's Jack? Jack would have come. Why is Jack not with Ethan? And now
Yeah.
suddenly it's like, we don't know who Ethan is. We know a name. We know he's from Ontario. We know nothing else. We know that, he's caught, he's been collecting wood, fruit, being helpful. Um, but now we honestly don't know. And that kind of harkens back to earlier in the episode when Hurley says, "We don't really know these people. You know a name." And then he reveals, he says, "Heck, my name isn't Hurley. It's Hugo
Yeah.
Reyes. But my nickname's Hurley, so I go by Hurley." And
I'm
he
not
said,
going to tell you why.
yeah, and he's like, "I'm not going to tell you why. I'm not telling you my backstory." But it does kind of, I was like, wow, yeah, you're right. We know a bit about Jack. We know a bit about Kate because we get the flashbacks, but that's where it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition between the survivors versus what we're getting to see. Because even though we're right there with the survivors, we also get a little bit of the backstory that keeps us involved, that allows us to understand some of the motivations of the characters and where they're coming from. So now we understand why Claire, doesn't necessarily trust others and why, you know, um, uh, her boyfriend kind of like splitting on her after 5 months.
What a
I
dill
was just
hole.
like, what an asshole, you know.
Yeah.
But
Big time.
but it also goes to show that, hey, we think we see stories about women that decide to keep the baby or decide not to keep the baby. Here's a case of, you know, they decided to keep the baby. Sorry, Max wants to be involved and show all of his glorious tail. Okay, there we go. Um, and just that there are a lot of different reasons for people to be in situations that they are in. And we can't just make judgment calls. We need to understand the story. So I
Yeah.
did actually like that about her story, but also all the stories of the characters that we're getting, all the backstories. Um, so yeah, I think that was kind of my thought about the episode when I first watched it. But yeah, Ethan showing up at the end, that was an oh shit moment because I'm like, wow, if that ever wasn't a cliffhanger, because that was truly a cliffhanger
Yeah.
versus whether, I guess, maybe Saeed being whether he was going to come back or not didn't feel as threatening as Ethan standing there in the jungle, just not being able to read him at all and
Yeah.
realizing we don't know who this person is.
And I think something I took away from the rewatch,
Mhm.
that I don't think I thought about when I initially watched is the creators do a good job of concealing or camouflaging at dangerous aspects of the island. Um, and with the case of Ethan, yeah, he popped up last week for the first time, but so did the hypochondriac who was worried about his eczema rash all over, and he was kind of prominent in last week's episode. We talked about it more offline, um, but so it made sense. And then in this episode, Hurley makes reference to Stephen Scott, which I believe Michael called on for on the beach to help when
Yep.
Jack was caved in. So there have been very minor characters who have been brought and introduced here and there. So seeing Ethan pop, I was like, oh, get bound to see. more people at some point.
Yeah.
So it didn't feel as if something was off. Um, when I watched, I know when I watched the episode originally, the ending was shocking because I
Hmm.
was like, he was the one that wasn't on the plane. Oh, like that was a surprise. But I was also surprised about the psychic. Like I didn't pick up on that. Like
Yeah.
that was a realization, as Charlie was saying, like, or not, I do believe in the gift. And if you were supposed to be the caretaker, maybe he knew what was going to happen. And then she, like you said, she's going through remember. So I think the creators of the show do a really good job at um, telling you what they want you to know when they want you to know.
Yeah.
Um, so there isn't, to me, it doesn't seem like there are a lot of like, I bet so and so is a problem. There's like, there's less of figuring things out in a show like Lost than maybe perhaps foretelling in another series or something like that. But, um, and I think that just amplifies the tension and like those moments when they pop up and it's like, ooh, I'm
Mhm.
that's freaky. Like I got to remember to take a breath and calm down from that scene. Like it's really impressive how a television show can really do that.
Yeah, and I'm just like, and I imagine back um how the water cooler was probably buzzing after that episode with everybody discussing that one, because of the fact that it did end the way that it did. Um, and trying to guess, well, it's almost like, well, this island is so mysterious and so weird. Is Ethan even human? I even had thoughts of that, like we don't we don't really know. We don't know what the black rock is from, Saeed's discussion with Danielle the week before. So is Ethan, blood and bones, and uh, was there really a syringe? Because that second nightmare that Claire has, I believe it's the second one, where she thinks that somebody's trying to poke a needle and get
Like,
I'm figuring it's, the embiotic fluid, like they're
yeah,
actually trying to get some of the fluid to probably do tests. um all that starts going through my mind, that, well, because I'm of the opinion, you're in a cave, how could this possibly happen? So I can devil's advocate, I could kind of understand Jack thinking like, well, how can that really happen in here?
yeah,
Because it's such kind of it looks like a small area. So you do have to kind of wonder, like, well, maybe is she hallucinating? It's not like that isn't the first time that, somebody has hallucinated. Gosh, Jack hallucinated, you know.
yeah, yeah.
So, um,
But I mean,
yeah.
I guess you could go back to the conversation Jack had with Locke. In Locke, it says, "Assume you're right. Assume you're hallucinating." And but his ultimate question is, "But what if you're not?" And
Yep.
so this comes back to Claire. What if she's not? And
Mm-hmm.
then Saeed comes back with, like you said, with Danielle's warning of quote unquote the others. And then
And
there's
they're
someone
not
who isn't on the
alone.
plane. And it's like, well, is Ethan this unknown others, uh, whatever? So it's very there is such a mystical element of the island. Like last week ended with Saeed hearing the whispers,
Mm-hmm.
and it sounds like ominous that something was possibly on the horizon, which is completely different of Ethan, who's literally standing right in front of Claire and Charlie, and that's like that's not ominous, that's threatening. Like so, um, it is hard to imagine how the characters are going to react. At least on an initial watch, how will they respond when they know someone wasn't on the plane? What is their course of action? You know, Locke is in the cave there. He seems very keen on the information that Saeed's sharing.
Yep.
Um, and, with him being a hunter, and he was the one that was hunting with Ethan. So,
Mhm.
he doesn't seem like someone who is fooled. Like he seems very aware of his surroundings and what people need and who should be the leaders. Um, so I'm interested to see how does Locke react to this person he was basically buddy buddy with out in the wilderness at night hunting. Like, and that's just like maybe selfish vantage point for Locke to take. Oh, I was with him. I should have known. I don't know. I don't remember his reaction if he has any at all, but he blended in.
Or if we play that game, or perhaps Locke already knew.
Hmm.
Perhaps
Right.
Locke, who's been the one going out and hunting and this and that, maybe he already knows that Ethan isn't who he's isn't a survivor, but actually on the island and is an other.
So I have a follow-up question regarding Ethan's origin or involvement to the island.
Hmm.
When you initially watched where Saeed was cracked over the head,
Yes.
and then we come to this point, and there was a kind of an assumption, well, Locke is the only one who seems to make sense to have done it. But when we
Hmm.
get to this point where Ethan it isn't on the plane, he shows up threatening to Claire and Charlie. Did that maybe pop into your mind? Well, did he hit Saeed?
It's funny. I didn't even think about that until you just mentioned it, but now I'm like, yeah, is it Ethan that actually did it? Because going back, thinking back, Locke says, well, it'd be somebody that probably doesn't want to be off the island. And that was the episode talking about kind of like framing things. So I just naturally assumed, well, we know that Locke doesn't want to be off the island because he's able to walk. But with Danielle saying that there are others, maybe there are others that don't want the survivors to be off the island. Why? We don't know. We're not privy. We know no information. But now that Ethan is there and he's not on the manifest list, um, yeah, maybe it's him that knocked Saeed out. Maybe there is a reason that they didn't want Saeed or the other survivors to find Danielle because for whatever reason she's been able to elude the others. At least that's the assumption that I'm going on because she's not with the others. She's been alone. She's staying in this little shack thing, or she's a really great actress and she's really part of the others.
Yeah.
But the fact that I tend to feel like she's a reliable narrator in a weird way, even though Saeed says you've been alone so long.
Yeah.
But I almost feel like she's still more of a reliable narrator to the story and that there probably are others. And now we're seeing that Ethan wasn't on the manifest. Maybe it was Ethan that actually hit Saeed over the head. Yeah. So now, yeah, maybe it is Ethan, or maybe, well, there's an S on the other. So there's probably more than one around. And if so, are they doing little things? And now you have to be worried about people that other humans will say. that these are other people that are messing with the survivors and their opportunity to get off the island.
Yeah, and I think you're right about Danielle being a reliable narrator. I don't, not that this necessarily matters, but I think every time I've watched that episode was and her interactions with Saeed,
Hmm.
she's just seemed completely believable. Like her experiences seemed real. What she was talking about seemed real, made sense for whatever reason, even though I didn't know the answer.
Hmm.
And I think that's where it also impacted Saeed because he ultimately believed her because he heard the whispers that she talked about. If you hear the whispers, you know that they're out there. And I think that's what made Saeed believe everything that she said, even though he, like you pointed out, he told her, I think you've been alone for too long.
Hmm.
Um, so it's similar to how Jack didn't believe Claire about someone trying to hurt her baby, much like
Hmm.
Saeed didn't initially believe Danielle. And until you get that little piece of the puzzle to prove, you're kind of left to speculate. Um, so I definitely agree. Danielle just her role just seemed to fit in right there,
Hmm.
leading into this episode with the potential of Ethan being an other. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, very intense episode. Um, I every time Claire screams, I tell you that is so impactful. Like it's
She did
such
a
a
magnificent job.
it is really jarring.
Mhm.
Like I when I turned it on the other night, I was like, oh, I gotta turn the volume down. Like because the kids were upstairs. It was like a little past bedtime, but sometimes the volume carries up and um but it is so and like her hands in the bassinet when she's dreaming and it's full of blood and um the freaky eyes with Locke where it's the light and dark backgammon pieces that he talked to Walt about. Um very interesting like tie back. Kind of highlighting light, dark, good, evil. Um
Mhm.
yeah, it's hard to wrap your head around all of the little things that keep popping up in each episode and remember, oh, that happened. Oh, that makes sense. That ties back to yeah, so it's now that we're 10 episodes in, could you ever imagine just stopping watching the show?
No. No. And I mean, like I said earlier, I mean, I went up to episode 21 when they start to um into the finale of the season. And it was hard because I know we talked and I was like, no, I'll wait because we'll go back, we'll discuss, and then, I will watch those for the first time when we get near to discussing. Because like you, I watch usually like a day before and a day or two before and then, watch it again. Um, so definitely my first impressions will be more clear once we get into the 20s of the first season. But yeah, I'm kind of this is how I feel with Buffy the Vampire Slayer too, is the fact that I feel like I really missed out on a pop culture phenomenon by not watching Lost when it first came on. I mean, but I don't even think I had a television at that point in time. So I feel like I missed out on a lot of conversations about Lost, and I don't even really remember if people were talking about that around me or not. Um, I think I was still going to school. So I think I was working on my master's at that time. So I probably didn't have a lot of time to watch, but I do feel like I missed out on something, you know, bigger than, a little series or something like this was actually a huge thing in pop culture, kind of like when True Blood came out and how huge that was and how it pervaded into, products. Like I remember True Blood. Oh, I think like blood orange drinks or something. I think there was like, something out there that just kind of, lots of different merchandising. Um, so I do feel like I missed out on a lot of that discourse that would have been happening at the time the series came out. And that's why I'm liking how we are doing this to have a discussion and, you know, really kind of dig deep into what's going on without binging, because this is definitely not a bingy type of series. And it was definitely written to create discourse between the viewers. And I think that unfortunately, that's something that I think we miss out nowadays because we are binging. Um, it's about the Big Bang delivering something so that way you can keep people to come back and keep them binge watching because we've kind of come into that.
Yeah.
So I do like that this is a one where we're taking time because I think it's meant to be relished and to have those conversations around it because there are a lot of themes that we touch on each week around that are bigger than us, the social aspects, political and things like that, that we miss out. And I think we do miss out today because the programming has to be so fast and engaging.
Yeah, I love that we're doing this because Lost just has this epic feel to it. Um and in an episode like this episode, like you touched upon it last week where they did some different camera angles where you could see how large part of the island was. In this episode, it made me realize how far it is from the cave to the beach. Like
Mhm.
it's a long, long ways away. I mean, I think initially Jack talked about it being like a, however, I don't know if he said half days hike or few hours, whatever it was, but it
Mhm.
didn't really register until you're seeing Charlie running through the forest forever trying to find Jack until he ultimately runs into Ethan. And it's
Yeah.
like, and you also see Charlie and Claire walking away from the cave and going through different like sections of like you have the forest, there's an open field. Um,
Yep.
and so it just there's a grandness to Lost that makes it so fun to talk about. Um, and I can't remember if I was in any big conversations when I was watching Lost. I don't I don't remember, but I would have totally like if I had a chance to get merchandise like a Lost t-shirt or whatever, I would have totally I'd still wear that stuff now. Um and rewatching it now just makes me realize, man, it is up there towards one as one of my favorite shows. Um
Yeah.
so I'm trying to think of and there's just a lot of intuitive commentary about their situations within each episode. Like last week, Hurley like understood like we need a golf course. People need to, veg out so they can not stress about the next time they're gonna next bad thing that's gonna happen. This week, he deduces we gotta do a census. Like we gotta figure out who's where, and technically we don't even know each other.
Yeah.
Charlie figures out that the psychic was intentional with putting Claire on the plane. So there's a lot of just interesting conversations that which you and I have talked about. The writers, like Chef's Kiss, whatever you want to call it, like they do such a great job at whatever formula they put in place to create dialogue and scenes that are either meaningful or intense,
Mhm.
they nail it.
Yeah, yeah. Going back to your comment about the geography of the place, I think that the writers do a good job of giving us some sense of how the scale, without really giving us a lot of scenes where we, see forest and the jungle, and I think they're intentionally kind of keeping it limited so that way there's still that real sense of danger when anybody leaves the cave. I'm like, oh crap, they're going out, are they gonna run into a monster? Are they gonna, fall and break their leg because they didn't see a hole, or, whatever might be the case. And there is very much that sense of still being lost. You're on the island, but like you said, you don't really know what is the distance between the cave and the beach. Um, and I like not knowing, in that things are slowly becoming more transparent, but it's unfolding at a rate that's akin to what the survivors are going through. The fact that we are seeing a microcosm of civilization developing. That's an aspect that I really like about this. The fact that Hurley's like, well, back home, if somebody gets attacked, the police go and canvass, they knock on doors, they try to get, information. Where were you? Who are you? What do you do? Is there a reason that you're there? Or, are you somewhere where you shouldn't be? That kind of thing. So he seems to kind of have a, his finger on the pulse of some of that development, because he's that conduit, like earlier episodes where he became the distributor of food. He raises the alert when they're, down to very little water and things like that. So I really feel like he's kind of our social speak person,
Yeah.
while Jack is very much the medical profession. Um, and others are other things. Locke is the hunter. He's kind of in that mode. So we're starting to have civilization develop, and we're slowly, that wildness that Sawyer is indicated and living in the first few days, eventually that'll start peeling away, I think. And that's another thing that I like about the show, is the fact that we're getting to see almost like an experiment unfold. Like, okay, here's a whole bunch of people. How are you going to act? Who's going to rise to the top? Who's going to fall down to the bottom? And it's almost like a survival of the fittest, like we're having a Darwin experiment here a little bit.
Yeah.
Like there's so many different aspects. Shannon and Boone were going to be going up to the caves. But when Hurley, says, well, Claire was attacked, it wasn't, well, Claire might have been, we suspect Claire was attacked, that kind of thing. It's interesting how language becomes abbreviated based on whoever's communicating it. Hurley's not a cop, but, he is validating and legitimizing why he's doing what he's doing. And Shannon, of
Yeah.
course, is like, when Hurley says, well, Claire was attacked and I'm doing this list so we know who each other are. And she's like, I'm not going up to the rape cave,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you hear the plunk of her bag, because she's not going up there. I don't know, she'll stay out on the beach. And, it's Boone that says, well, if you have the manifest, how does Boone know that? But, it's like, maybe he saw it in the luggage. I don't know. But, he's aware of the manifest. So it is interesting, and it's a very fascinating experiment with all these people. And I am really right now very curious because Ethan's kind of slipped in to the repertoire of 46 survivors. I am kind of curious. While we get to know the other survivors as well as we're getting to know these kind of main 7 or 8 people. So
Yeah.
I'm very anxious to see how that unfolds. And knowing that I've been to episode 21, I know that, we learn about some, the main ones. But I am kind of curious going into, season 2 and beyond how that will unfold. Um,
Yeah.
because there really is only if you kept it to the 7, there's only so much storytelling you can do. And I'm sure you know that as a writer of fiction, Travis, that you do have to have your supporting characters and you do have to be able to breathe life and bring in other things, which I think is working well with the flashbacks to bring in their stories. Um, but from a narrative point, you will need to have other things to help bring in, expand, and allow this story, this narrative to go on for 121 episodes.
Yeah,
So,
and Ethan is the perfect example of
mhm.
bringing a new character who introduces conflict of some kind.
Yep.
Um, and that creates a scenario where the castaways have to figure out, um, what do we do? How do we approach it? Where is he? Where's Claire? Where's Charlie? Um, so you're right. I mean, introducing new characters help, you know, either tip the scales in a way to where the group has to like decide how to deal with it, or maybe
Hmm.
presents an even greater conflict because the group can't figure out what to do with it. Um, so yeah, and Sawyer, the pack rat, you know, like his perspective has shifted. Like the fact that he gave up the manifest. I love that scene. That scene with him and Hurley just like talking about like Hurley's like, I'm just gonna give it to you straight. I know you have the manifest, and I think you should just give it to me. And and he talks about, I know your normal reaction is to tell people to screw off, and Sawyer's kind of taken aback and just like, screw off. What? Uh, he's like, I'm a little more vulgar than that. Yes, he's probably thinking that. So I think that might be the lightest scene of the whole episode is the interaction between the two of them.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that kind of brings in, what is a favorite scene or standout moment from the episode. And I actually have down that conversation for me was like a big highlight of the episode. And I think it is because it's a light one. Um, the fact that Hurley shows courage. He's been in conflict with Sawyer. Sawyer is a bully.
Hmm.
He comes off as the bully, whether long term he is or not, remains to be seen. But he is kind of a dangerous person. And the fact that his power is coming from the fact that he has information, he has actual resources that allow him to power play over other people. And the fact that Hurley just goes over, sits his butt down in the chair, and says, okay, this is how it could play out. Here's how I want it to play out. And of course, Sawyer, as Sawyer, says, all right, Stay Puff, you gave me a good argument. Go ahead. The manifest is in the brown luggage. It's in there. Go ahead and take it. Let's just bypass everything. I'm good. I'm cool. You know, and maybe it is still Sawyer trying to make some brownie points because, Hurley does make that point that, hey,
Yeah.
you can make some points this way. And, Sawyer acquiesces and lets him have the manifest without saying, well, you got to give me something in return, or breaks his balls, before he'll give it up, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. Um, I also like the fact that it's a little hard to really see Hurley as a true bully when he's got the 50s cat meow type of sunglasses on as he soaks up the sun. It does kind of give a softer edge to Sawyer in that
It
moment.
and it's so unusual, and yet he just needs sunglasses, so he puts on whatever, and
Yep.
so it kind of almost digs into, like, I guess he doesn't care about his image to a degree, while also it's just kind of fun to see him wearing those sunglasses. Yeah, that scene is great. Um, yeah, Hurley had a strong episode.
Yeah, he did. Um, was that your favorite scene, or did you have a different standout moment of the episode?
Um, I think I will say when Claire is talking to Charlie about the psychic, when
Hmm.
she's trying to calm down from the contractions, that realization where she's like, "Ah, he was just full of it." And his response, he kind of ponders for a moment and he just says, "Or not." And he starts to go about like, well, he said that you had to be the only one that could care for it. And maybe he knew about the crash. And that's why you're on this specific flight because you could only be on this flight. It has to be 815, flight
Yeah.
815. That realization I thought was such a mind-blowing thing because again, it presents like these otherworldly forces that seem to be tied with the survivors or the island, and um it just kind of adds that extra oomph to the show that um not every show can manufacture. So I think that scene and that realization, um again, just the way, the tone of his voice, and just I don't know, it's there's so many believable moments within the show, and him coming to the realization with Claire that she, a psychic, put her on a plane that he knew was going to crash. That's startling. Like, so, did he know that it was she would survive?
I
Like,
I
that's
I
a
I feel like we have to assume that he knew she was going to survive. Otherwise, I don't think his conscience, the guilt of sending somebody to their death, he doesn't strike me based on what we get to see about the psychic. The
yeah,
fact that he was willing to give the money back to her in the first reading. And then when he did take the money in the second reading, that reaped many more fold because he gave her 6,000 Australian dollars and the ticket, and however much that ticket cost to
yeah,
make sure that she was going to be on that plane the next day. And I kind of go back to, well, yes, he knew about the plane, but I bet he also knew that there were other forces at work, her mom, her boyfriend, and this type of thing that could have ended up
foster couple,
changing her mind. Hmm?
even the foster couple.
Yes,
Like where the
that's right.
pen wouldn't sign, and that kind of piggyback to where before that pen scene happened, it showed him calling her and him saying, "I know you have doubts about giving up the baby."
Yep.
And then the next scene was her trying to sign, and that was almost like validating her hesitation to give up the baby. So very interesting. And you're probably right. I think the psychic probably knew that she would have survived.
Yeah. And I think that, the fact that her not going on the plane was still the opportunity that she'd be influenced by her sphere of family or friends or boyfriend to ultimately go against her feelings and give up the baby. So, I'm sure that's another reason why he wanted her on the plane, knowing that she'd survive and she'd have her baby with her. Um, and the fact that, real subtle points, like, you know, he said that she was a good person, a good influence, and the baby needed that. Um, is validating for her because she is 8 months pregnant. She's on an island with a bunch of people she doesn't know. She doesn't know Charlie. She finds out that he was a drug addict,
It
which
just
kind of
blurts it
like,
out because he's trying to, I can do this.
yeah,
I can deliver a baby. I've kicked drugs. I'm
yeah, to
like,
which it was like that, uh-oh moment, yeah, like her, like, who is this guy? And then
yeah,
realizing he meant it from a good place,
yeah.
again, wiping the slate clean, Um, but there's just those wonderful little things. I even liked um Hurley asking Locke about himself. And he's at first, I think he kind of jokes with him like, who put you in charge type of thing or something. He
Yeah,
says,
who's keeping track of you?
yes, to which Hurley's kind of like, me. And and then Locke says, "Oh, I'm just joking with you," and then he tells him that he spent most of his life in Tustin, California. And I'm going to tell you, I know that place. I lived in
Okay.
Orange, right next door, so I know where Tustin is. I'm like, I know you, Locke. And I like how he said that, you know, he went to Australia to look for something, and then he gets that far off look again, like he had in the at the tail end of that one episode, and you're like, well, what might he been looking at? Was he looking
Yeah,
at, at the other survivors? Was he looking off to the island or the ocean? And he does it again, and only this time we know he's looking out into the forest. And it's interesting because Locke says, I was looking for something, but something found him instead. And even
yeah,
says that. And it's like Hurley doesn't ask, but I'm like, I was sure like, that's an interesting tidbit, and you gotta like a squirrel that nut away, that little nugget for another
yeah,
day when that actually blooms. Um, Writers are amazing, and
yeah.
just putting out all these little things together, and then building off of them. I wish the hell I could write like that. So
And Hurley just by that comment gets thrown off and it's like, oh, okay, dude, I've got enough, and he just
yeah,
finds an excuse to like walk away from Locke. Yeah, so many fascinating characters on the show.
yeah. And I totally forgotten. Now I'm just remembering that Hurley asked somebody about their details, and he's like, I just needed to ask you again. I know you already told me. I just didn't want to hear this again or something like that. And I thought that was hilarious. How many of us do that?
Yeah, that was the getaway act. Get away from Locke.
Yeah.
That's yeah. That seems like such a natural thing for someone to do.
Yep.
Like, oh, okay, I'll see you later. Oh, hey, so and so. Like,
It's
yeah,
really the writers cue into a lot of the human nature. Um, and I think that maybe that helps when you're having a multitude of writers or you've got a writer's Bible there. Um, I don't know. But I think this was written by Paul Denny, who has the comic book connection again. I think he was wrote a couple of the episodes. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back to our episode Bible that we're keeping with regards to if he's written more than one. But yeah, I
I
like
gotta
the
give you credit for that.
oh, thanks.
That you put that together. So that's kudos to you for sure.
Oh, thank you. But I just like the ease in which you can believe the way people behave because it's identifiable with ourselves. Oh yeah, I've done that, or oh, hey, my friend has done that to me before, or whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah. So our next question that we typically kind of converse around is who is the most interesting character of the episode? So I'm gonna punt that over to you and let you answer first.
Well, while I dilly-dally, we're going to be doing this enough to where, if anyone is watching, thank you.
Yes.
You will find out through the course of videos that I shrink in these episodes because my chair will not stay up. So as I talk, I'm going to adjust my chair. Um, there I'm a little higher. So I I think the probably it's between again I usually float around three people. Obviously Claire's the main focus. Charlie is great. Um, but I think I'm finally going to give one to Hurley. I He is able to figure stuff out. And in this episode, he discovers the thing that leads to a cliffhanger that someone was not on the plane, and that person is staring at Claire and Charlie at the end of the episode. Um, and his interactions are so fun, and he reacts in a way that seems natural when he's nervous, and he also has this confidence that he can have with his interaction with Sawyer, that is so likable because, I find myself not always, most of the time not being like a super confident person.
Mhm.
Um, and but and I've seen Hurley be the kind of nervous, twitchy kind of in certain situations, like, oh, Kate, you're the criminal. I'm not supposed to know that you're a criminal. I'm going to walk away from you. But he comes up to Sawyer like, where did this guy come from? And it's great. So I love seeing that, and um, I know that's not my favorite moment of the episode because I love knowing that the psychic what he did. But all of his interactions and what he's able to do to kind of solve the mystery of who attacked Claire. Um, yeah, so I'm going to give it to Hurley this episode.
Mhm.
What about you?
Yeah, I like you, it kind of revolved around Claire, Charlie, and Hurley. And I felt I had to give it to Hurley because of the scene with Sawyer and having the courage to go up to the bully and just have a frank conversation. Um, I my heart swelled, at that moment. And I like Hurley.
Yeah.
And I just felt like he's cute in, and I like that he is. And the fact that, there's been things that he's done that really helps others in a very not, hey, look at me, look at what I'm doing, or anything like that. It's very selfless. And I like that about him that it's for the greater good. It's not just for him. Because he can probably take care of himself. Um, but the fact that, he has a soft spot for Claire as well, even though, he hasn't, hung on her sleeve like Charlie has, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way.
Yeah.
Um, but the fact is, Charlie does have feelings for Claire, and I think that Hurley does, but it's more of a resulting from, I think, the first episode where Jack says, "Hey, watch out for her," and I think
Yeah.
he carries that because I think he does have takes those type of things to heart. We see him reacting a bit differently than Boone does. Boone is also a follower, but he reacts differently than Hurley would. And I like that Hurley is not afraid, learning to not be afraid and finding his voice amongst the survivors. And that how what he's bringing up has value, and he can see that. And we, as an audience, can see that. Um, so yeah, I went
Yeah. Like
went with Hurley.
yeah, I was thinking, we talked about earlier in this season, like Kate was kind of like, she's kind of like the glue of the group. She's kind of keeping everyone together, trying to like prevent conflict. And the last couple episodes, you see kind of Hurley in a similar role. Um, not that he's not necessarily preventing conflict, but he's like you said, kind of like making sure everyone has the social breaks to help, you know, de-stress and, survive, not just survive, but like live while they're surviving. So he fits a similar role, I think, as Kate. Um, Kate is more of the adventurer. She's ready to like go tackle whatever needs to be done anywhere. And Hurley's kind of like like I'm while we're in the camp, like I get stuff done. Like
Yep.
so he's kind of like focused on stuff around camp. Kate kind of will go off and with the transceivers and all that stuff. So I see similar roles. Obviously, they're very different characters, but I can kind of see how some characters are filling certain types of roles. Um, and it's interesting to see like that hierarchy play out. And well, where does Hurley land now in this hierarchy? Because he's doing more than maybe a Shannon or Boone. At this point, Jin or Sun, and maybe he, gets a little higher up. Because I mean, we talked about last week, like Michael didn't even know about the polar bear,
No.
and
Yeah.
he helped get Jack out of a cave or attempt to get out of a cave, and he was building like trying to build a shower, and
Hmm.
so he's clearly a valued member of the group despite not having all the information. And Hurley has been gathering all the information and figuring this stuff. So I am interested to see because I can't remember, but I am interested to see like where along this pyramid of leadership will he fall?
Yeah.
Because he seems, especially in this episode, he's necessary. He finds that there's a problem.
Yeah. And addresses it and is doesn't hesitate. It's like, hey, I see this problem. I have a solution. I'm gonna take care of the solution. So yeah,
Yeah,
I like that. And I also feel like he is the yin to yang of Sawyer, where Sawyer's hoarding, not helping. Um, Hurley is kind of like bringing information together, but he doesn't hoard it. He's using it for good.
yeah,
So
that's
it'll
a
be
great point.
interesting
Yeah,
to see how that progresses. Will it rub off on Sawyer? How will Sawyer be in future episodes? I don't think his asshole status is going to probably dissipate anytime soon. I think he will still be kind of that internal, you know, uh, fire spark that, lights people up a
yeah,
bit. So, yeah, but And like, we said at the beginning, and as we talked offline, this was the first episode that really just focused in on one, which was definitely kind of it was an interesting pacing, narratively speaking, as well. The fact that we probably had about the same amount of flashbacks that we did with Saeed. Um, and but we didn't have all the many things going on as much. And so it was interesting that the writers were getting us to kind of focus in uh, on her. So I'm curious how that's going to pay off down the road
Yeah.
because like Michael was in construction, but he's also an artist, and like he brought up him coming up with the idea of the showers. Well, when I'm assuming that's going to come to fruition at some point, but that also means he probably has ideas for how to get off the island because he can construct stuff. So will they be able to gather enough of the resources that they can do that? So that'll be interesting to see how the writers cash in on these various nuggets that they plant for us. And even things that they plant that are so subtle that we don't catch until further down the road. And then it's like, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, now I remember. Yes, I got hit on the head. Maybe it's not luck. Maybe it's
Yeah.
good, So yeah, I like that.
Yeah. I like when they can tie back to a previous episode that was several episodes prior and kind of give some information to further identify more about a character or a situation that happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm looking, scrolling through my notes, and I think I've kind of picked everything except for one, which is kind of picking up on our conversation about what was going on around in our world while the survivors were out there on that lost island. Um, you know, this episode was in the beginning of December of 2004. And Boone does mention that he doesn't like Hurley setting up his very own Patriot
Mm,
Act. And so I did go back to refresh my memory just a little bit because I, of course, very much remember the fact how controversial that was, how much discourse was around the erosion of our personal freedoms, and find that interesting that he said that, given in light of the fact that they probably had the most freedom there because they didn't have social media. You couldn't really, you know, they didn't have weapons per se, ways of you know, conducting surveillance and getting into mischief to the levels of terrorism and things like that. Uh, so I did find that interesting, and I did look to see like why that comment was in there. And because it was in 2004, that act went into effect in 2001. But there was
okay.
also sunset clauses built into that act that were um, that were going to terminate parts of the act in 2005 unless it was extended. So I do think that I don't necessarily remember pointed aspects of 2000, end of 2004 and early 2005. But I am kind of thinking that maybe there must have been a ramp up of political conversations and, of course, social media, news outlet conversations around this continuing erosion of our personal freedoms that was existing at that time. So it's interesting that that did make its way into the show.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's for me, I would say that's probably about all of my notes. Did we cover everything that you were hoping to cover?
The only thing I can think of is just a sound that I heard.
Mm-hmm.
Early in the episode when Claire is first dreaming, she wanders through the forest at night and she finds Locke at a desk with a lamp,
Mm-hmm.
and he's dealing pulling cards from the top of a deck. And the first card he pulls off, it sounds like the sound you get when you sharpen a knife.
Oh, I do recall that.
And I don't think it happened with the second or any other card. I think it was just that very first one. And I thought that was such an interesting little aspect that kind of identifies, well, that's makes sense because Locke with the knives, and you hear that metallic clank from, or whatever you want to call from sharpening.
Mhm.
So I thought that was interesting. They've put a lot of thought into all of these moments. And again, that's a dream sequence. Um, and she sees someone running off in the distance, and you can't tell who it is, so you don't know if it's a meant to be a young child or a person. Um, but just that little nugget of hearing the sound of a knife sharpening as he pulls a card from the deck, I just thought that was interesting. And I like that they are willing just to do little things like that to kind of enhance the viewing experience.
Yeah. Um, Now I am kind of curious with that same scene. I took it that he was looking at tarot cards. Did you also think that when you saw that scene?
Now I do. No, I did. That did not register. That makes complete sense. Of course, that's what he was looking at. Yeah, that makes complete sense.
Yeah. I immediately thought he was looking at tarot cards, which I thought was interesting, but um when you mentioned the sound, I was like, that's right, there was that sound. So, and then of course, further in that dream, she comes across the blood, which is if there was some sort of, I'm going to say ceremonial slice, something, um, then the blood on this pure white blankets, I mean, they were so pure white. And then
Hmm.
this very, very dark color liquid that turns out to be blood. I even wondered if the child running through the forest, I even briefly was at Alex. And I was even thinking about Ethan at a moment whether he might be Alex, that he was actually Alex, not Ethan, that Ethan was just a fake name altogether.
Yeah, I was wondering if, because in the dream sequence, she's not pregnant. She has
No.
her normal body, and like I think there was a moment where I was like, well, is that her child grown up in this dream sequence?
Yeah.
That's where my brain first went to.
Yeah, I wondered that too because the child you just real briefly see does have very light blonde hair like her. So I did kind of, yeah, like you, I kind of wondered what was that supposed to be her child? I mean, she thinks it's her son. I mean, she's already thinking that it's a son, even though she didn't know the sex. I guess they chose not to know the sex ahead of time. So yeah, just very interesting. I think there's a lot of symbolism, that came up in this episode with the dreams. And I mean, I'm not I'm not a Freudian scholar by any means, but I feel like there's stuff there to unpack around that. The light and the dark eyes, they make it, definitely can harken back to him playing backgammon with Walt, and that involves a child. Walt is a child. So it's interesting that it's Locke that's in this dream.
Yeah.
Also being a philosopher, is that all that different from a psychic? Maybe. I don't know.
And the psychic talks about the baby essentially will be good or bad. Like it will
Hmm.
be dangerous without Claire in its life, or it will be okay. So it's kind of, yeah, there's that
Yeah,
toting that line between light and dark, and um, they've touched on it with a few different elements throughout the series so far.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think that leaves us to, I don't know, maybe rejoin again and talk about the next episode next week, right?
Absolutely. So everyone that's watching, thank you for watching. Who do you think was your favorite character? Your favorite scene? Drop a note in the comments below. Just remember, Michelle is the newbie, so try to prevent any spoiler-filled comments. If you do, just make sure to say spoiler alert ahead. Um, ah, another great chat.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. So, yeah, we'll see you again next week on Ride the Stream. Appreciate you all coming and listening to what we have to talk about it as we ruminate over episode 10, with many more to come. And we will talk next week. So thanks, everyone.